Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back. Roger here with the Real Breakdown. Today, guys, we're going to talk about the Oscars, one of my favorite times of the year. We're talking about the best pictures according to the Academy. This is the people in Hollywood. So today, specifically, we're going to be talking about the Best Picture nominees. Now, could I try to go through every single category? I could, but that would take forever, and honestly, I just don't have enough time to do that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm only going to go over the Best Picture nominees because for this year, guys, I did it. I watched every single film that is nominated. In the past, I have watched a good amount of them. I've watched all of them but one. But this, I believe, is the first year, maybe the second year. I don't remember if last year or the year before I watched all of them, that I actually watched every single film. And this year we have 10 nominees, guys. So we're talking about the 95th Oscars here, the biggest night of film. And so we're talking about the 10 films that are nominated for Best Picture. Those films are All Quiet on the Western Front, you have Tar, you have Triangle of Sadness, you have Avatar The Way of Water, Top Gun Maverick, The Banshees of Inisherin, you have Elvis, you have Everything Everywhere All at Once, Women Talking, and you have The Fablemans. 10 films, guys. Wow. That's a lot of movies. And I'll be honest, guys, the reason that I was able to watch all of them this year is because by the time they announced the Best Picture nominees, I had already seen a majority of them because this year they actually nominated quite a few films that aren't just like your normal, like, oh, these are your lower budget, like indie films that no one has talked about and they're Oscar baity. Like, no, they actually nominated some very popular films. They actually nominated Avatar The Way of Water, which is the biggest film of the year financially and is now, like, I believe at this time of filming, it's the number 4 movie of all time. So Top Gun Maverick made it in. So this year, guys, they actually nominated quite a variety of different films, which, I mean, I guess they do every year, but I'm talking about the films that your everyday person has actually heard of. So that's something that the Academy doesn't always do, but this year they did. And so that's why by the time those nominees had been announced, I had already seen like 4 or 5 of them. And really, I only had to watch the other 6 films or so. So what I'm going to do here, guys, is I'm going to go through each one of the Best Picture nominees. And I'm just going to do kind of a quick, like, my thoughts on it. I might talk about, like, what my expectations were of it or, like, what I was thinking going in. But I'm not going to do a super deep dive on each because with 10 of them, that would just take too long. So I'm just going to give you my quick thoughts on each. And at the end of all that, I'm going to give you guys 3 things. And that's, number 1, what film I think will win the Best Picture of the year. Number 2, what film I think should win Best Picture of the year. And number 3, what my personal favorite film of the year is from this list. So with that said, let's jump right into it. All right, guys, so to start this off, I'm going to go through these movies in somewhat of an order of how I watched them. So the first one that I want to talk about is Top Gun Maverick. Now, I'll be honest, this is a movie that I was surprised to see on this list, but I'm actually very happy that it is. Top Gun Maverick is one of those movies that this year was kind of a surprise to all of us. Number 1, because of how good it was, but how well it also did financially and like how successful it was with people, because people thought Top Gun Maverick, that movie, the original Top Gun, is super old. Like, are people still going to go see this? But guys, I have to tell you, this movie is a visual masterpiece. The amazing camera work, CGI, the cinematography that was used in this film to showcase those, aerial fight scenes and that aerial combat was just amazing to see. And I was very excited that this movie got made in our modern times because I wanted to see what that kind of aerial combat will look like, with modern technology and just able to, compared to the first Top Gun, I feel like this movie just beats it out of the water when it comes to those scenes and just being the best word I can use to describe this film is just entertaining. This movie is so fun. It's honestly a reminder of why movies need to be seen in a theater. To watch this movie on a huge screen with amazing sound in Dolby, per my recommendation, obviously, is just the best way to enjoy this film. I mean, there's action, there's intensity, there's emotion, there's all sorts of things in this film. And honestly, when it really comes down to it, I actually think the story of this movie is pretty simplistic. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's one of those films where just like in the first one, you don't even know who the villain is. That's how simplistic the story is. You just know, hey, there's a mission, we got to do this, and these are the parameters, and we're going to train for it. So, I mean, I'm not like discrediting the story. What I'm saying is that for a movie that's pretty kind of simple and a bit generic, everything else around it is amazing and elevates that story to something that's actually more entertaining. So that's actually something I find really interesting, because I'm usually a very like, hey, story comes first. Story is the most important thing when it comes to a film. But this movie, the story is kind of the last thing I talk about. It doesn't necessarily matter where they're going or what they're doing. You care about the characters, the drama, the action, the amazing aerial fights, and how all that combat is choreographed. How awesome it looks to see these airplanes, jets, whatever they're called, fly through the air, and just Tom Cruise being Tom Cruise, right? So this movie, guys, while at first I was kind of shocked to see it on this list, the more I think about it, it makes total sense, because this movie epitomizes what seeing a movie in a theater is all about. And obviously it makes sense that the Academy is going to reward that. So that's Top Gun Maverick, guys. I had a blast with it, and I think it definitely deserves to be on this list. All right, guys, so the second film on my list here is Elvis. Now, Elvis was a movie that I was very excited to see. You have Baz Luhrmann directing it, right? You have Austin Butler, who I didn't know until this movie, but obviously everyone knows his name now. And the incredible story of Elvis Presley. Now, I have to tell you guys, this movie is probably my most watched movie out of this list, which, if you know me, I usually see movies twice, if not 3 times, before I tend to do a review or some sort of video on it. This movie I've probably seen about 6, maybe 7 times, and the amount of times I've looked up clips of this movie on YouTube is pretty ridiculous too. Not to mention, I have a lot of Elvis's music on my playlist right now. Why is this movie on this list? Why is it nominated for Best Picture? Well, I personally think deservingly so, because this movie is something where, number one, Baz Luhrmann directing it, his style is all over this film. Sometimes a little too much for my taste. But this is definitely a stylized film that showcases, great directing, great storytelling, great character, and kind of character development, and just like an amazing story of this iconic figure that actually, this is actually a more of a very sad story, right, when you really look at it. But some of the great things about this film are that, because of the stylized form that Baz Luhrmann directs his movies with, this film, like, enraptures you in this world that they create, right? There's a certain color palette to it. There's a certain kind of stylization to this film, and you're fully in it. You believe you're in there. Now, what also really helps this movie is that you have an incredible actor like Austin Butler, who, I mean, he as Elvis is super compelling already, with an incredible story. And not only do we see that Austin Butler does a great job in this movie, but I'll be honest, from my perspective, I mean, he kind of fully embodies and becomes Elvis. So that to me was something where it made this movie more believable. It got me more into this world, and watching it was just an experience. Now, this is another film that also was very entertaining. It's more so less of a message type of a movie, but more of a entertaining, telling a story movie. And I can always appreciate that when it's done very well. So while I wasn't surprised that this one was on the list of Best Picture nominees, it's one that I was super happy that it was. And honestly, if it wasn't, I was going to be pretty upset, because this is a movie that really captured my attention and honestly kept me going back. And obviously, with actors like Tom Hanks and Austin Butler, who was a revelation in this film, pulling out some pretty great performances. Is it a perfect film? No. I think that this movie, for my personal taste, focuses a little too much on Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's manager. But even with that aside, it's still a phenomenally done movie, and I think one that is fully deserved to be on this list. And honestly, one that I think that is going to be talked about for many years to come. So yeah, shout out to Elvis. To this day, it's one of my favorite movies, and every once in a while, I still go back and watch it. So moving on, the next one on my list is Avatar: The Way of Water. Guys, this movie, I have to say, I'm going to make a statement right now, is probably the all-around best made movie on this list. What do I mean by that? This movie, in my opinion, succeeds at almost every single aspect of the film, of its like creation, of the different aspects of the movie, than any other film on this list. Without even getting into the CGI aspect and how amazing, everything looked, and the groundbreaking technology that James Cameron used, developed, created for this film. Before I even get into all that, this film did the number one thing that I care about in a movie right, which is story. The difference between Avatar 2, The Way of Water, and the first Avatar, which, if you know me, guys, you know that the first Avatar I wasn't a big fan of. I thought it was overhyped. I didn't dislike it. I thought it was a good movie, but I didn't think it was great or amazing as everyone was making it out to be. So coming into this movie, I wouldn't say that I had skepticism to it, but I definitely was like, okay, I was expecting just something pretty average, and this movie blew me away, and mostly because of the story. To me, the addition of the children to this world and to this storyline was vital. I think that adding this dimension, this aspect of family to this movie gave it so much heart, gave it so much purpose, gave it another dimension to the story that like the previous one just didn't have, right? It's no longer about this like Dances with Wolves kind of guy that he's with an indigenous tribe and he has to learn their ways. It's now about like this family. It's not about these children and what they're going through and how their family dynamics work. And one of the things that I think gets understated about this movie, because yeah, everyone talks about the CGI work and the motion capture and all that great stuff that was done for this film, and I full praise on it. I'm just not an expert on that. I mean, not that I'm an expert on any of this stuff, but the one thing that I think people are kind of forgetting is this movie does a great job of having so many characters and giving us a little bit of a glimpse into each one of their, like, each character has a storyline and they're all interwoven so well into one, yes, it's a lengthy film, but one script into one storyline. I mean, I could easily point out to a number of characters in this movie and tell you why I enjoyed their storyline in this movie, right? So if we want to talk about the daughter, right, the adopted daughter, like, she has so much backstory. Her mom, Sigourney Weaver, who is in that floating water chamber, her avatar is, who we lost in the first movie, like that, there's that whole backstory. There's the story of the son, the younger son that they have, where he feels like the black sheep and heading into this new tribe of people. They reject him, and he's just, and so there's that aspect of it. You can talk about the whales. I mean, there's so many things that are in this movie, and the one thing that James Cameron does well is that at the end of the day, having all this substance, having all this stuff, he still tells a great story. And so that, for me, is one of the major reasons as to why Avatar: The Way of Water not only deserves to be on this list, but for me personally, truly is a top contender of potentially winning Best Picture of the Year. Now, the next movie that I'm going to talk about is Everything Everywhere All at Once. This movie, guys, I'm going to just be honest, I'm in the minority. I didn't really enjoy this movie as much as everyone else did. I know for a lot of people, this is their favorite movie of the year, and this is the one that they think is going to win. A lot of people are predicting it to win Best Picture of the Year. I watched this movie, guys, and I have to say, it just really wasn't my cup of tea. I can appreciate, what the Daniels did, the directors, in making this movie. I think that they did a great job. The movie is well put together. The movie is well made. There's nothing wrong with it. For me personally, just the way that the story was told, which, by the way, I do like the message of the story, kind of highlighting this mother-daughter relationship. And so all that, I do like that message. But for me, the way that this message of mother-daughter relationship was kind of showcased in this like multiversal, kind of like over-the-top bonkers like way, to me just didn't work. It's not really something that I vibe with. It's similar to like Thor: Love and Thunder, like that kind of storytelling, or the James Gunn Suicide Squad movie. Like that kind of storytelling is just not my favorite. Like, for me, this movie just didn't have verisimilitude. It didn't feel like it was grounded in reality. And I get that that's kind of the point of it, but like the bagel and like the Rock universe and like the hot dog finger universe, that to me was just bonkers, and like just some stuff that kind of hindered the story that they were trying to tell. I will say though, Ki Hugh Kwan in this movie is incredible. The way that he played that role and his kind of like role in the movie, I really appreciated. And to be honest, guys, I think I would have enjoyed this movie a little bit more if it focused more on him, because he delivered a phenomenal performance. I know that he's also nominated and touted to be a top contender for the best actor, and so is Michelle Yeoh. So, guys, this movie wasn't bad. It was very well made. It was well acted, well directed. For me, the tone of the film just kind of wasn't for me. All I can really say is that I can appreciate the movie for how it's made, but for me, I just wish they would have tried to tell this story in a different manner or gone in a different direction. But then again, that's what makes this film very special for a lot of people. So with all due respect, it just didn't work for me. So but either way, Ki Hugh Kwan was my favorite part of the movie, and yeah, those are my thoughts on Everything Everywhere All at Once. Up next, we have The Banshees of Inisherin. This movie, guys, I didn't really know what I was walking into when I went to go see this movie. And what I can say is that I was very surprised at the fact that you can make a movie and tell a story about two people where one person no longer wants to be friends with another one. Now, I know that's kind of oversimplifying what this movie is, but guys, this movie was surprising, intriguing, and honestly, I had a really good time watching it. I think this movie really works for a few different reasons. Number one, the two main stars, Colin Farrell, Brendan Gleeson, they did a phenomenal job in their roles, and they committed. Even though there were times where this movie can seem kind of silly or kind of, it's a simplistic story, but they made it believable. Colin Farrell's performance is great. Brendan Gleeson in it is great. Kerry Condon is amazing in this, and Barry Keoghan. The fact that Barry Keoghan didn't get nominated for supporting actor is kind of annoying to me, because he was phenomenal in this. I'm really starting to like him as an actor, but anyways, their roles were really great. I also want to say the cinematography on this was really well done. I mean, you watching this movie, they constantly remind you that you're on some remote island, off the coast of Ireland, which kind of makes it kind of just provides the environment for this movie, right? These are two people that are gonna have to run into each other. One of them no longer wants to speak to the other. The one thing that for me made this movie very intriguing, no, it wasn't the finger cutting. That was, I can't believe he went through with that. And yes, that's an interesting part of the movie. I'm not going to lie. But the one thing that really intrigued me, this idea of one individual who no longer wants to be friend with another person because he finds him to be dull, and not just hey, you're dull, I don't want to talk to you anymore, but you're dull and I'm realizing that I now want to do something with my life, that I don't have a lot of years left, and I'm more of a creative person, I'm more of a higher intellectual person, and I want to leave a legacy. I'm starting to concern myself with legacy, so I don't want to spend 2 hours talking about your donkey's, poop. That whole idea I thought was really interesting. So from that perspective, I think that gave this movie a little bit more intrigue, because when you're kind of hey, it's a movie about two guys in a local town who just don't want to be friends anymore, you think, wow, you're gonna make an entire movie about that, and it's gonna be nominated for Best Picture. So yeah, guys, the great performances, the actual intrigue of the characters that were put on screen, yes, the finger cutting, that's what made this movie a lot more entertaining. And yeah, there were elements of comedy and elements of seriousness and emotion. So overall, I think it's very deserving to be on this list of the Best Picture nominees. Okay, so now on to the next film, Women Talking. Guys, I walked into this movie, again, just like some of the other ones, not knowing what I was getting into. And within the first 5 minutes, I knew what kind of movie this was going to be. And I have to say that Women Talking is one of the most powerful, most meaningful, most this movie is just something else. This movie impacted me in a way that other movies haven't in a long time. I know that this film is a very serious subject matter, right? When we're talking about rape, that's something that's not taken lightly. But I have to tell you, in this movie, I wept in the theater like I haven't wept in a really long time. Now, with that said, what made it a little bit better that I was weeping was that there was no one in the theater, so I was kind of happy about that. However, I was upset because more people need to see this movie. I know that this is a film that a lot of people haven't seen and probably won't see, and I think that's very unfortunate. However, I do understand that not everyone wants to see a movie that talks about rape or that talks about women getting together and talking. Some people don't like that. So I think it's unfortunate that not a lot of people are going to get to see this film, because this film is incredible. This movie not only covers the number one thing that I care about in movies, which I've already said is story, but it also covers the second thing, which is characters. In this movie, you have Rooney Mara, Claire Foy, Jessie Buckley, Frances McDormand, and Ben Whishaw, who I didn't really know before this, and now I will never forget Ben Whishaw in this movie. This movie has great actresses and a great actor, and they do a phenomenal job, but the characters that they were given. Now, I recently learned that this movie is based on a book. I haven't read that book, so I was not aware. I don't even know if this is a true story or not. I'm assuming it is. The characters in this and how they were portrayed by the actors in it was amazing. I think the subject matter is super heavy and super intense, but it's handled with so much grace, with so much powerfulness, with such care, and the message of this movie is just one that, like, I honestly will never forget. And for me personally, having being a film that not only covered story, which is the most important thing to me, covered characters, which is the second most important thing for me in a film, but thirdly, also delivered such a profound message in such a well delivered way. I think that this movie is one that more people should be watching, and more people should be kind of taking something away from it. But I also understand why it isn't. So at the end of the day, though, I'm very glad that this movie got nominated. Otherwise, I honestly would not have seen it. Although I don't think it has the greatest chance of winning. I think this movie, more than a few of the other nominees on this list, should have a real chance at winning the best picture of the year. All right, so the next film I'm going to be talking about is The Fablemans, directed by Steven Spielberg. This is the type of movie that Hollywood loves. So I was very excited to go in and watch this movie. And as Spielberg always does, he does a great job of making a film. This film is well directed, it's well composed, it's got great actors in it, it's got great performances in it. The characters, I think, are, for the most part, pretty well done. Steven Spielberg always does a great job of at least having all the different parts of his movie be at a certain level. They're at least good, if not great, right? And so with all that said, I do have to say that the story for me kind of fell flat in this. Yeah, guys, unfortunately, I wasn't very impressed with the story. To be honest, I actually thought the story was kind of boring. There were a few times that I was like, checking my watch when I was in the theater. I wish I would have loved it. I wanted to love it. I found myself in the movie watching it and just waiting for that like moment of just like, oh, like that compelling moment, that moment for me to be like, yes, that's where he found his love for film. And honestly, I just felt like it wasn't coming. And it wasn't the fault of the writing. It wasn't the fault of the actors. Honestly, for me, the best part of the story was the drama between his mom and Seth Rogen's character, his mom played by Michelle Williams, and that whole drama. Other than that, I mean, like, I found, like, where was the story going? We were just watching a kid kind of grow up, but, like, there wasn't really a compelling story there. And I know many people might disagree. I might be in the minority. I know a lot of people love Steven Spielberg, and there's movies that from Steven Spielberg that I really like. So I'm not here saying that Steven Spielberg sucks or anything. No. I'm just saying that for me, like, he did everything right for the most part, but at the end of the day, story for me is the most important thing, and I really felt like the story fell flat for me. So those are my thoughts on The Fablemans, and man, I wanted to love it so much. All right, so the next film on my list is All Quiet on the Western Front. This movie is one that actually really surprised me, because have we seen war films before? Yes. Have we seen World War I movies before? Yes. However, what intrigued me about this movie, and this is something I did know going into the movie, was that this was from the perspective of the German side, and also this film was made in Germany, or from Germany. This film was coming from Germany. So I thought, wow, interesting. I don't think I've ever seen it. A lot of the movies we see are either from the British side or from, the US side. But this was going to give us a different perspective. And boy, did it delivered. I really enjoyed this movie. It's another one of those movies that's very powerful. It's sometimes a bit of a tough watch, especially for people who don't necessarily like war films. First of all, this movie starts out with, like, the first 5 to 10 minutes of this movie are incredible. They really just kind of show you, wow, okay, this is the type of movie we're going to see. You're talking about that opening scene where you think you're following this one young kid, then you realize you're not, and then you see like the process that his body goes through, and then like his uniform goes through all the way to be delivered straight to the character who is going to be our main character. You know, one of the things that this movie does very well is that it really does a great job of highlighting the realities of war, and not just the gruesomeness, but because there is some gruesomeness, they do show some, you know, some, oh god, that's how war is, you know. But when I say the realities of war, I mean that they're getting ready to do a ceasefire, but this one general is like, you know what, screw that, I'm not gonna do that, we're gonna fight to the end. And they force all of them to go into battle, and the realities of trench warfare, and how bad it was to be in some of those trenches and some of those bunkers. So this movie just did a great job of all that. To me, this movie kind of gave me 1917 vibes, directed by Sam Mendes from a few years ago. Not that I'm saying it's a direct comparison, but it gave me that type of vibe where I'm just like, oh, you just feel like you're in there. You feel like you're in the mud. You feel like you're there with them. And the characters and actors were written, and the actors delivered so well in this movie that, you know, hey, a Netflix movie being nominated for Best Picture of the Year, it can happen, you know, but very, very well deserved. So All Quiet on the Western Front was honestly one of those movies that surprised me, and it delivered on pretty much all fronts. So yeah, great job to everyone that worked on that film, and well deserved to be nominated for Best Picture of the Year. Okay, so now we're down to our last two films. And before I get into the next one, I do have to say these last two films, which are the last ones that I watched recently, were probably the more interesting ones of this list. So it was kind of interesting that they were the last ones on my list. The next one I watched was Tar. And this movie with Cate Blanchett, I have to say, I had no idea what I was walking into. And so I was very surprised to find that, you know, this movie actually ends up being kind of a psychological thriller. It starts off, you know, with you meeting this like grand conductor who's like at the height of her powers, and she's very sophisticated and all this and that, and you think, okay, wow, we're gonna see a movie about this grand figure in history, which, by the way, I don't even know if this movie is real. I'm thinking that it is, that this is an actual real person they were doing the movie about, but I don't know, I'd have to look it up. Yeah, so you're thinking, okay, wow, we're gonna see, it's kind of biographical maybe, but then you start seeing that, oh, wait a minute, this is a movie about someone abusing their powers. This is a movie about, you know, it's kind of a psychological thriller the way it's presented because of all the things that this individual person has done and how they're dealing with it and how they might be a little bit like paranoid about it. And so I was thoroughly surprised by this movie. I enjoyed this movie. It didn't end up being what I thought it was. And honestly, there's a bit of like whiplash in this movie. The movie from a few years ago, the movie that has J.K. Simmons and Miles Teller in it, where it's like also like a musical kind of figurehead that's very prominent and holds a lot of power over these other musicians who are playing instruments. And yeah, so this movie was super interesting. I did not think it was going to turn into this like abuse of power type of story, and how, you know, they were manipulating people and exchanging, you know, sexual favors for favoritism within the orchestra. So very interesting movie. I thought Cate Blanchett was phenomenal. It's very obvious why she was nominated for Best Actress and why a lot of people believe she has a really good chance of winning. And another thing that I want to mention about this movie is that one of the things that I actually ended up really enjoying was that at first I was thinking, man, I feel like as a viewer, I'm trying too hard to put things together. But then I started realizing that what's happening here, and I think the movie does this great, is that, you know, you kind of get presented with this image of this character, and slowly throughout the movie, what's happening is they're peeling back the curtain on what this character truly is. It's kind of like you're peeling away pieces of the mask of who this individual really is. And by the end of it, you see the reality of this monster, or of this individual, or of this person who is not the person that was presented at the beginning of the movie. So I thought that was very smart of the film to do, to start you off by that and slowly throughout the movie kind of get you there, and adding a bit of that psychological thriller aspect to it, which at one point I even thought like, wait a minute, is this a horror movie? Yeah, guys, great film. I ended up really enjoying it. Well deserved to be on the list of best pictures of the year. All right, so here we are. The last film that I saw was Triangle of Sadness. This movie, guys, to me is probably the most interesting movie of the bunch, and it's one that I didn't know what it was about before I went into it, but I don't think I could have ever expected what I ended up seeing in this movie. This film to me is a satirical look at the privileged and wealthy. It really is a comedy. This movie took me on a roller coaster ride. I didn't know what was happening and if we were really going there in a lot of these, in a lot of the moments of this film. But yeah, we went to a lot of places in this movie and somehow we end up on an island. So in this movie, some very interesting concepts and societal norms are commented on and even flipped on their head. Which I thought was a smart way to like kind of format this movie if you're going to do this type of movie. With that said, I would say that my favorite moment of this movie was all the way in the beginning when you have that opening scene of, you know, the male model trying to get a gig, and it's like obviously, you know, very tough. You know, you're competing against like a bunch of other people, and then you see his girlfriend, the female model, like already on the runway, and she's got all this clout and stuff like that. And then that scene at dinner afterwards, after her fashion show, I thought was very interesting on like who's gonna pay and how they handle it, and that kind of interaction of like, well, you said you were gonna pay, and then the girlfriend is like, well, I make more money than you, and then you kind of understand the dynamic of like, well, in that industry, the women make more than the men, so how is that weird when like, you know, two people in that industry are dating and one has more clout than the other and the roles are reversed. So very interesting concepts and all that. And so that was kind of, to me, the height of the movie of like, wow, this movie has a lot of potential. Obviously, as the movie goes on, they kind of take it in other directions. I will say, guys, this film wasn't necessarily my favorite. It probably might be my least favorite on this list. I thought it was a very interesting concept, but they just take so many wild turns. I think that if you took this movie and you say, okay, we're going to flip two concepts on their head, and I would have been okay. But this movie did like 6 or 8 of them. And so by the end of it, when you're on the island, and by the end of it, guys, I'm like, okay, so what happened? What did I just watch? Like, what made sense? And there also the ending. The ending is kind of out of nowhere. I feel like I need an explanation. I have to look up at one of those YouTube like explainer videos on like what the ending means, because maybe I just didn't understand it. I felt like this movie at a certain point was trying to do too much. I appreciated the comedy, I appreciated the satirical look at it, but by the end of it, I did think, you overstepped a few times. You did too much. You tried to do too much. So, however, it is a very well-made movie. I think that the actors actually did a great job. Like, for them to keep a straight face in a lot of these scenes, especially the captain's dinner scene and all the things that happen and all the fluids that come out in that scene. I think the actors did a great job in like selling it and like just being in the moment, and I can't imagine what it was like to be on set during some of those. It's a very well made movie. Out of all of them, this is the one where I'm like, does this movie really deserve to be on this list? Like, I don't want to be disrespectful. I don't want to discredit anyone that worked on this film or anything like that, but because making a movie is tough. So I'm going to defer to the Academy, but for me personally, I do kind of question, like, this one got nominated over some of these other films that came out. But, you know, hey, what can I say? I'm just a guy giving my opinion. So those are my thoughts on Triangle of Sadness. Okay, so we went through all 10 movies. We went through the entire list. And now let me tell you guys my prediction on what film I think will win, what film I think should win, and which film do I personally want to win. So number 1, the movie that I think is going to win is Everything Everywhere All at Once. I think that the way that, you know, the award season has been going and the different awards that have been won, obviously with the SAG Awards recently, Everything Everywhere All at Once won a ton of awards there. I think the Academy is going to give it to Everything Everywhere All at Once. Would that be my pick? No, probably not. But at the same time, you know, it is a movie that deserves to be on this list. So, you know, I wouldn't have an issue with it. So number 2, the film that I think should win is Avatar: The Way of Water. I think that film, guys, exceeded in all its different parts of its conception. So, like, I feel like James Cameron did an incredible job directing it. I think the story was just very well written. The characters had so much depth. I think that obviously the visuals were incredible. They took something that was already created and expanded on it. They gave this story so much heart that we cared about these people. And by the end of it, you know, I personally like got very emotional at like how this story ended, or kind of like what happened to some of these characters. So overall, I think this movie excelled in all of its aspects, and I think that for that reason, like, it should be the one that truly wins. Unfortunately, I don't think that the Academy will give it to Avatar: The Way of Water, but that's the film that I think should win. Now, for my third one, which is the film that I personally want to win, I know it's not going to happen, but I want Women Talking to win. I know I just talked a great deal about Avatar: The Way of Water and how much I love that film, but this movie, Women Talking, it impacted me. I've always had such a respect and profound admiration for women. This movie, to me, just does a phenomenal job of sending a message and talking about such a heavy, difficult, and delicate topic in such a great way. And it's a film that I think that more people need to see, as I've said before already. I walked out of this movie just with a different perspective on life. So for that reason, and I know that's particular to me, that's why there's 3 categories here, guys. And this is the one of, like, for me personally, based off my experience with this movie and just the sensibilities that cater to me, this is the film that I want to win Best Picture, because I love this movie so much. And it's not even, oh god, it feels weird saying that you love it because it's such a touchy subject, but Women Talking, to me, is the best movie I've seen all year, and I think that's the one that should win. Unfortunately, I don't think that's the way it's going to go, and the fact that it's nominated is phenomenal because it means that people like me went to watch it because it is on this list, but I don't think it's going to win, and that's fine, but yeah, I'd be super happy if either Avatar: The Way of Water or oh my god, if Women Talking won, I'd be ecstatic, but I do think it's going to be Everything Everywhere All at Once, which, sometimes it rolls that way, and that's fine. So there it is, guys. That's it. I talked about each one of the movies. I'm super happy that I got to see every film that was nominated for Best Picture this year. It's something I've been wanting to do. I was able to do it this year. Hopefully I'm able to do it next year. And yeah, guys, what a great year of films. And I can't wait for the Oscars. It's going to be such a fun time. I love acknowledging great film. I love acknowledging, movies and just, like, guys, I just love films, man. I just love movies so much. So the Oscars are a great event to do that at. Hopefully there won't be a slap this year or some dumb dramatic thing that happens that takes away from the acknowledgments we want to give to these films and these artists. But yeah, guys, make sure to watch the Oscars, and with that said, guys, we will see you in the next one. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and stay tuned for what's next to come on The Real Breakdown.